Hi guys, this is a video about comparing and ordering rational numbers. Alright, so let's open it up and get started. You see at the top we have a number line here. Just kind of as a quick review, we started rational numbers with a smaller set of numbers called the integers. Remember, your integers included 0, the positive numbers, and where were positive numbers compared to 0? They were to the right, so 1, 2, 3. Normally we put numbers down below, but I'm putting them on top just so I have more room. And then where are your negative numbers? They're to the left, -1, -2, -3. And we could keep going on this number line. The rational numbers are also going to include fractions and decimals. So if I was trying to graph, let's say, like 1.5, where do you think 1.5 would be on the number line? Well, it's between 1 and 2. So if I said somewhere like right here, this would be like 1.5 or 1.5. Okay, if I wanted to find -1.5, where would that be on the number line? It would be between -1 and -2. So -1.5 would be also between it, but between negative numbers. So this would be like a -1.5. All right, so we're going to be looking at fractions and decimals and how they compare to integers and whole numbers, and we can use a number line to do that. But again, remember that your numbers on the right are positive. They're also bigger or larger. And as numbers go to the left on a number line, they get smaller or they get negative if you go past 0. All right, so smallest numbers are going to be on the left. Bigger numbers are going to be on the right. The negative numbers are always smaller than the what? Positive numbers. All right, so anytime comparing negative and positive, negatives will always be smaller. All right, so another thing to keep in mind when you're comparing is what the symbols are when comparing. And so you hopefully already know this, but this is the symbol for less than. This is the symbol for greater than. A lot of people remember less than because if you stand that little symbol up, it looks like an L, sort of. All right, so kind of imagine that. This is the less than. All right, so we're going to compare in these examples using greater than, less than, or equal to. So in the first example, -1.2 and 0.8. So you can look at a number line and decide, where's -1.2? Well, that's going to be over here because it's negative. Where's positive 0.8? Well, that's going to be over here because that is positive. All right, so we would want to use what in this case? Negative is less than positive, so less than looks like that. Oops, sorry, couldn't see that. All right, in the next example, I have two negative numbers, -1.40 and -1.25. All right, when you're comparing two negative numbers, what you need to know is which number is the most, right? The most to the left. So if you're thinking about a number line, even if you got rid of your decimal here, which number is going to be furthest to the left? -140 or -125? Okay, well, hopefully you can see. Same thing with the decimal. -1.4 is going to be further to the left than -1.2. So it is smaller, it is less than -1.25. All right, in the next example, I have -1.5, and I'm going to compare that to -1.581. Now, here's one of those times where we need to do something to the numbers before we compare them. It is dangerous to try to compare them without making sure they have the same number of decimal places. So look at this one. This has 1, 2, 3 decimal places. This one just has 1. So what could we do so that we could make this number have the same number of decimal places as this one without changing the numbers? Well, one thing you can do is add zeros. So there are 3 here, so I need to add 2 zeros here. Now I'm looking at a number with the equal number of decimal places. So if I compare -1.500 to -1.581, right? Well, the first number is the same, right? The -1 and the -1, so I don't really have to compare that. I'm looking at the 581 and the 500. Oh, let's write down. What did we do? We added zeros. So which number is furthest? Okay, remember the smallest number is on the left. So which one's the smallest? This one or this one? Well, if you get rid of the decimal, because I can compare these now without a decimal because they have the same number of decimal places. Which one on a number line, okay, if I think about it, is -1,581? That's going to be here. Where would -1,500 be? it would be over here. So this one is bigger than this one. So this number here is actually larger or further to the right. So if it's bigger, I'm going to use greater than to write it down. All right, and number 4, now I'm comparing 0.7 to a fraction. So that is difficult to do, right? These are two different types of numbers. I can't compare them until I change them to the same kind of numbers. So I could change 0.7 to a fraction, but then I would have to get a common denominator with this fraction over here. So what we're going to do is we're going to skip that step, and we're just going to change fractions into decimals. And we just learned how to do that, so it should be no problem. So this is okay because it's already a decimal, but this one I want to go ahead and change to a fraction. And how do I use that or do that? I'm using something called Tybo, right? So my top number is a 3. It goes inside my box. My bottom number comes outside my box. All right, can I divide 4 into 3? Nope, you can't. So you can put a 0 there if you want. But I'm going to add a decimal. Remember, if I add a decimal here, I have to add a decimal here. And then I can add the 0. So now I'm dividing 4 into 30. So 4, we'll go into 30 7 times. 7 times 4 is 28. I subtract, I get 2, and now I can bring down another 0. 4 will go into 20. How many times? 5 times. All right, so 5 times. 5 times 4 is 20, and I'm done. All right, so now I'm comparing 0.7 to 0.75. All right, now I have another problem. These don't have the same number of decimal places. This has 2 and this has 1. So what did we do before? In order to make them the same, you have to add a 0. All right, these are both positive numbers, so it's a little easier. When I'm comparing positive numbers, which number looks bigger to you? Well, the 7.5, right? 0.75. So it's the bigger number. So this one is less than this one. So I'm going to use less than here. I'm going to fill in less than up here with the 3/4. Does that make sense? Hopefully it does. With negative, it's kind of the opposite of what you think. The smaller number is bigger, smaller value. All right, and in example 5, 2.06 and 2 and 3/50. Again, this is a decimal and this is a mixed number or fraction, so I have to change that before I can compare these. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to rewrite this as 2 point something, but I have to figure out this fraction before I can compare it. So now I'm going to use Tybo again. So my top number is 3. It goes inside my box. My bottom number is 50. It goes outside my box. And can I divide 50 into 3? No, I cannot. So you can put a 0 here, but that's not going to stay a 0 because it's got that 2 there. All right, then I add a decimal here, so I bring it up, and now I can add another 0. All right, so can 50 go into 30? No, it cannot. So you have to have a number above that 0. So you're going to say 0 times 50 is 0. And I get 30, and now I can bring another number down. Don't forget about this 0. All right, so how many times does 50 go into 300? Well, 5 times 6 is 30, so 6 times 50 is 300. So this ends up being 3/50 is 0.06. Because of the whole number in front of the fraction, I'm going to have a whole number in front of my decimal. So instead of 0.06, I'm going to have 2.06. So now I'm comparing 2.06 to 2.06. And what do you think? They look the same to me, don't they? Okay, so these are equal. And that's what's going to go in my answer. Ordering, similar idea. You want to put them either in order least to greatest and greatest to least, but you're going to see that we're going to mix up the types of numbers we have here. So we have decimals, we have some whole numbers, we have some fractions, we have mixed numbers, all right? And what we want to do before we try ordering at all is change everything into a decimal. So the first thing we're going to do when ordering is change all our fractions to decimals using Tybo. Then if we need to, we're going to add zeros to the decimal so that all the numbers have the same number of decimal places. That's what we did over here when we added zeros to our numbers over here. Okay, the only time you don't add zeros, and we'll see an example of that, is when you have a repeating decimal. So if a number is repeating 3 over and over again, you won't add zeros, you'll add whatever's repeating. You'll add the 3 if it's repeating a 3. And I'll show you an example in a minute. All right, so let's take a look at this first one. We have 3 numbers. 2 of them have fractions. So our first step is to change our fractions into decimals. All right, so, and I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to line up my numbers because it makes it easier for me to see. So I have negative 2.46. I'm going to go ahead and rewrite that. The next number I'm going to have is negative 2 point something. I just have to do this part first. So I'm going to come over here and do this part. So Tybo, top number is 22. It goes in the box. Bottom number is 25. It goes outside the box. Can I divide 25 into 22? No, I cannot. So add my decimal, top and bottom, and another 0. How many times does 25 go into 2.20? Think about quarters. How many quarters would go into $2 or $2.20? 8. 8 times 25 or 8 quarters is $2. So when I subtract, I get 20. Since I have a remainder, I have to add another 0 and keep going. 25 will go into 200 8 times. So 200. I have no remainder. So what did I get with 22 25ths? I changed it to 0.88. It was really negative 2 and 22 25ths. So this is really going to be negative 2.88. And then I want to change 8 ninths, kind of the same thing. So I'm making my list of numbers here. Negative 2, it's going to be negative 2 point something. I just need to figure out the something, the point something with the 8 ninths. So my top number is 8, goes inside my box. 9 is my bottom number, it goes outside. 9 won't go into 8. Add a decimal, bring it up, add another 0 down here. So 9 will go into 80. Hopefully you know this. 8 times. 8 times 9 is 72. When I subtract, I get 8. Add a 0, bring it down, 80. 9 will go into 80. How many times? 8 times. 8 times 9 is 72. Okay, if I subtract, I get 8. Bring down a 0. What's happening here? 9 will go into 80, 8 times. This is a repeating decimal. I keep getting the same. You see how I keep getting the same remainder each time? So this number is repeating. Remember, you can put a line over that number to show that it's repeating. And over here, I'm going to have 2.8. Now, I could put repeating 8 here, but I want it to have the same number of digits as the ones above it. So I need to have at least 2. So 288. Okay, so it looks like these two numbers are the same, but are they really the same? Not really, because this is repeating an 8, but this had an 8 and then it stopped. So if I was going to add another digit to all of these so I could tell them apart, on these two I would add a 0. Okay, but on this one, if it's repeating the 8, I add an 8 because it repeats that 8 over and over. So now I can tell these numbers apart. I know which one to put first or second. All right, these are negative numbers, so it's the opposite of what I think. Instead of, I'm going least to greatest. So the least is really like the biggest, negative. Which one's the most negative? Was it 888 or 880? This is the biggest. So it actually comes first. It's the furthest to the left on the number line. So that would be negative 2.88, or 8 repeating. Then what would come next? Negative 2.88. 0, and then what? Negative 2.460. All right, so these are in order least to greatest. All right, but that's not how they started out. So my last step is to go back, and I'm going to rewrite these in the form that they gave me. So negative 2.8 repeating, that started off as negative 2 and 8 ninths. I'm going to rewrite that as 2 and 8 ninths. Negative 2.88 started off as negative 2 and 22 25ths. And then negative 2.46 was just negative 2.46. All right, so that's going to be my final answer there. Look at the last example, order greatest to least. Lots of numbers here. It's really easy to lose some of the numbers. So I'm going to keep a list out to the side. And the first step is to change these fractions into decimals. So I've got 2 fractions I want to do that with. So 3 right away, that's my first number. I'm going to put it there. I'm probably going to need some decimals, so I'll just go ahead and put a decimal there. The next number is going to be 1 2/3. I'm going to change that 2/3 to a decimal. I'm going to put 1 point something so I don't forget the whole number. The 2/3 I need to go ahead and change. So top goes in, bottom goes out. That's the 3. 3 won't go into 2. Add your decimal, bring it up, add a 0. 3 will go into 20. How many times? 6 times. 6 times 3 is 18. I subtract, I get 2. So I add another 0 because I have a remainder. 3 will go into 20. How many times? 6 times. 6 times 3 is 18. I subtract, I get what? 2. What's happening? It's repeating. How do you show a repeating decimal? That line above the digit. All right, so I'm going to add that over here with the 1 and have 1.6 repeating. All right, my next number is negative 4.64. That's a decimal, so I don't need to change anything. Over here, 1.6, that's a decimal. I don't need to change anything. This is 2 4/5, so it's going to be 2. My whole number is 2, but I need to change that fraction to a decimal. So I'm going to put the point there to remind me, and then I'm going to change this one. The top end is 4, bottom out is 5. 5 won't go into 4. Add a decimal, bring it up, add a 0. 5 will go into 40 how many times? 8 times. 8 times 5 is 40, and I'm done. So that was, instead of 0.8, because of the whole number, it's 2.8. The 0 here is just acting as a placeholder. All right, my next number was negative 4.5. My next number is 0, and my next number is 2.7. And sometimes when you line up your numbers like that, it's easy to see, you know what, these numbers don't all have the same number of digits. And that's a problem. I want them all to have the same number of decimal places. So after I change all my fractions, I have to add zeros. So in this first one, let's say the most decimal places I have is 2. So I'm going to add 2 zeros here. This one has 2, this one has 2. I need to add 1 0 here, 1 here, 1 here, 0. I can put 0.00, and then I need 1 0 here. All right, and then make sure you double check. In this problem, instead of going least to greatest, now I'm going greatest to least. So that's the opposite. That's a little tricky too. So I want to start with the biggest number. Well, the biggest number is going to be negative or positive? Well, bigger is going to be positive. So I want to start with my positive, my most positive number, which would be what? 3.00. Okay, and the next one would be, I can look at the whole numbers first and then look at their decimals. So which is bigger, 2.8 or 2.7? And I'm going biggest to smallest, so I want bigger. 2.8 would be next. Then 2.7. Now I go to my 1, the whole number with a 1, and then I look at the digits after that. So which is bigger, 1.66 or 1.60? 1.66. 1.60 would be next. And then I would look for, I've done all the ones, so I'm going to look for the 0. Okay, so now I have 0. And once I get to 0, I switch to negative. So I want the largest negative. Okay, well the largest negative is the one that's the least negative. All right, so think about your number line. Which one comes first after you get through 0? This one, negative 4.5. And then negative 4.64. Negative 4.64 is the smallest because it's the one furthest to the left. All right, so this is in the correct order, but it's not in the same form, that it started with up here. So what I want to do is now replace the numbers with what they started with originally. So 3.00 was really just a 3. 2.8 started as 2 4/5. 2.70 was just 2.7. 1.6 repeating was 1 2/3. 1.60 was just 1.6. 0.00 was really just a 0. Negative 4.5 was negative 4.5. And negative 4.64 was negative 4.64. All right, so once you get everything in the correct order and in the right form, then that's your answer. All right, so again, just kind of to review, I'll let you look at that for a minute. When you're comparing and ordering fractions and decimals and integers, you want to make sure they're all in the same form. So your first step is to change all your fractions into decimals. And then you need to make sure all your decimals have the same number of decimal places. So sometimes you're adding zeros. Sometimes if it's a repeating decimal, you're adding whatever's repeating. And then pay attention. Is it least to greatest or greatest to least? Because that's going to change the order you put things in. Remember, positives are always bigger than negatives. And then most negative, okay, even though it's more negative, All right, it's the smallest, so it would come first if you're going least to greatest. All right, I will see you in class. Thanks.